speed of work, get more done, unlock more time, more money, and more freedom.
Join us as we explore the challenges and power of making work visible. Welcome to the Visible Workplace Podcast with Dr. Tom Raleigh.
Now, let's get into today's episode.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode 33 of the Visible Workplace with myself, Tom Raleigh. Excited to have you here today. We're going to be looking at one of the persistent challenges that a lot of businesses face. And this is, how do we track improvements in the way that we do the work? And this is a problem. This is a serious problem and it causes a lot of difficulties. And the end result usually is a return to the dreaded micromanaging. Yes, if people don't make the changes and track the improvements that happen, then guess what? They need to be told what to do, but nobody likes this. Nobody likes this at all. So we're going to look at, well, how do we deal with this? How do we face this problem of tracking improvements while we're working? And then how do we make sure that they get used next time and avoid having to tell people and remind people and say, you know what, last time I told you to do it this way, you haven't made that improvement, what's going on? And then we end up in a world of blame and shame and they're like, oh, I forgot, and you know, the cat ate my homework or the dog ate my homework, whatever the excuse is. But really underneath that is a structural problem. We're going to look at that today. You see, this problem of tracking improvements and making improvements to the work that we do is very prevalent. And it happens because of the inability to actually see and have a constant structure about how we track our work. Now, the usual outcomes that I've seen, and you may well have seen this, is that when we allow people just to create their own way of tracking work, one of two things commonly happens. The first one is that they end up with a to-do list. And this can happen even with project management software or with Kanban board software. Essentially what they've got is an isolated to-do list. Do this, do this, do this, do this. And that's okay, but it does prevent the rest of the team being able to see what's going on. The second thing that can happen is that we end up with extremely complex boards, or spreadsheets usually, or project management systems that the only person who knows how to do them are or is the person using it. If there's more people on that one, then fine. They all know how to do it. But if they leave or they're sick or they're on holidays, then coming into that structure and looking at it and go, ooh, I don't know what's going on here. So these two outcomes are very common. One, to fancy to-do list. Number two, overly complex spreadsheets to track our work. Now, the problem here is that making improvements to this is very difficult because we don't have a consistent structure for how we do work. Now, obviously, the MagicBoards method helps this because we do have a consistent structure. We've got the processes or the steps or what to do at the top, and down the bottom, we've got the outcomes or the results that we want. Same structure all the time, whether we're doing marketing and creating offers or defining our avatar, or whether we're doing accounting and payroll, whether we're doing fulfillment and going through and serving our customers, whether we're creating an ad, whether we're building a funnel, whatever it is, all work largely fits into this structure. Do this, do this, do this, and get this and this. And so the MagicBoards matches that outcome. And this allows you to begin to capture improvements. Why? Because the structure is the same, even though all of those different forms of work are very different. Their outcomes are very different. Over here, we've got an avatar being created, an offer being created, an ad being created, a payroll being executed, a hiring process. But the structure that all of those go through is consistent. Do the work, do the work, do the work, get the result, get the results. And because of that underlying nature, that this is how things get done, this is why the MagicBoards method works. So without tracking, without structure, we're going to struggle. But with that structure in place, then if the order of results changes, we can easily adjust that. If a new step has to be done, we can add that in easily. If a step has to be removed, we can do that easily because we have the structure in place. And so seeing these improvements becomes easy on a magic board. But that's not all that we're dealing with. You see, one of the funny things about improvements is that they happen when we're doing the work. They don't happen in the theoretical looking at how the work is done. This is usually very difficult. It's not until I actually go and execute the work that I realize, that step doesn't work. Had that this morning, was going through a board. I'm like, this step at the top is irrelevant. And it was irrelevant because we were using ChatGPT and ChatGPT already had that information. And so I was like, just delete all of that. And we don't need that first process. So I deleted it. And now we've made an improvement while working. So notice the first thing I want you to catch here is that the improvements to workflows happen when you're doing the work. They don't happen looking at the work or looking at the magic board. It's when you actually do it. Now this, my voice just went really funny there. I hope you enjoyed that little odd voice thing. Oh well, righto, coming back over. So we've got this situation where the improvements happen when we're doing the work. But how do we capture those? How do we capture those? Well, before we do that, let's look at the usual situation, even if you are using some kind of structure. Let's say you've just got the project management piece or you've just got the SOP piece and you go ahead and you don't make the improvements. Well, what happens? Well, you get a bunch of errors. You get version errors. We've got a copy of it over here and a copy over there and a copy somewhere else. Which one's the right one to use? The other common situations is that the whole thing becomes out of date. People don't use the SOPs in the first place. They don't have them easily accessible, so they become out of date. This can happen also with templates. Both of these problems. Number one, multiple copies of templates because someone's made an improvement. They copied it, made a copy of that template, improved it, but they've left the other one hanging around. It's not been archived or deleted. And they're like, which one do I use? Particularly if it's referenced somewhere in another spreadsheet or it's on someone's desktop and they haven't realized that the new version is now available. So we've got version control problems. We've got out-of-date problems. We also, typically, this is all very difficult to train on. If you've got different structures, when you improve them, it's like, what happened? I then have to explain to people, these are the changes that we made. If we have this consistent structure, then guess what? It's obvious. Oh, wow. Step 2, move to step 3. I guess I will do step 1, step 2, step 3 in order, even though they've changed from last time I remember. It's like, okay, I'll go through and execute that. And wow, that worked. So the power of a consistent structure for not only allowing you to make the improvements, but also share those improvements is very, very easy. And in fact, what you can do, at least on the MagicBoards app, is then save those improvements back to the library. So what I found was that people would do work and it would be a copy of a set of instructions that would give a set of results. Just like if you follow the recipe for a chocolate cake, you'll get a chocolate cake. If you follow the recipe or the steps for building a Lego, then you'll get that Lego. And this is happening in work. But if you don't make a copy of the original template, then you'll end up filling that template with just the first version. And so it fills up and then you've got to make a copy but delete all the existing work, or do you just delete the work and forget about it? This can be a problem if you're trying to show, hey, I got these things done this week, but because the structure of the board wasn't copied first, you have to eliminate it and you can't actually show and say, hey, this is what we got. This is also a problem if in a couple of months' time there's a problem. You're like, hey, you didn't do that work. And if you did have that copy of the board right there, you can say, hey, here it is. See it. But if you delete it every time, you don't have that. So what I found was that you have a template of the work and make a copy of it, and then you've got a fresh version ready to go. And as you complete in that version, then you can move it to an archive and see the work that's been done in the past. Now, sometimes you might even say, you know what, this particular piece of work is so important, I'm going to move it to an asset and easily be able to find it again. But this still doesn't deal with our central problem. If we've got improvements being made when we're working, how do we capture those? And so what I found is that when the improvements are made, you also then need to copy that back to the library and replace the first template. Replace the first version with the improved version. Now, in software, this was difficult. I tried a bunch of different ones. Some could do it, but were very expensive. You had to move to the super premium prices in order to be able to duplicate these boards. And some just couldn't do it. It was like, we were not expecting you to say that we want to make a copy of these boards, so you can't do that. But this is core to tracking the improvements. You could make a choice and say, you know what, I'm going to delete the data each time. And then when you make the improvements, it'll be there. But you'll only have one version of the board. And as we already discussed, you'll lose the data each time you go to use it. The second option is that you have a template of the workflow, a template of the Magic Board, and you copy it, do the work. But when you make the improvements, then you need to bring those back. So there are your two choices. Perhaps you've got a third version. Perhaps you're like, oh, no, Tom. Hey, guess what? There's this other way that you can do all of this. And please let me know if you have that, because it'd be really awesome. But I haven't found it. I've found that your two choices for tracking the improvements of work are, number one, you have one board that you use and you delete the data each time. Or secondly, which is my preferred method because it allows you to see the work that's been done in the past, is that you have a template Magic Board, you copy it, and then you do the work in that copy and move it to archive, and you capture the improvements that happen there by saving it back to the library and updating that template that it came from. This is as close as I've found to the ability to track these improvements, to prevent multiple versions, to ensure that we've only got one copy of how we do things. All significant advantages of the Magic Boards method. All right, that's all I got for you today. If you need help with this, head over to www.magicboards.io and check out some of the stuff there. I hope that you are seeing the insights that's coming from this, that we've got two big problems. Number one, an inconsistent structure of how we do work means that it's difficult to teach, difficult to train, difficult to improve. And then secondly, even with a consistent structure, we've still got to have the awareness of how we're going to capture those improvements that happen when we work. All right, hope you got a lot of value out of today's episode. Thanks for tuning in. Look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The Visible Workplace. I'll see you then.
Thanks for tuning into the Visible Workplace podcast. Subscribe for more productivity tips and share with friends. We love your feedback, so please rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. For more tips and tools, visit www.magicboards.io. Thanks again, and see you next episode. Disclaimer: the information and ideas discussed in this episode are general in nature and do not take into account your specific circumstances. You should seek specialist advice for any medical, financial, emotional, mental, or other difficulties that you are facing with appropriate specialists and professionals so that they can apply your specific circumstances and give you the required advice.